asked us to put this track together and handle the mobile side of the content. They give us full editorial control as well as control of all the speakers. So I'm very confident that the information that you're going to get and share is going to be quite relevant. Wanted to give a little background on Mobile Growth Fellowship. We had a name change. We started about 3 years ago, around 3 years ago, and it was myself, my co-founder, Yousuf, who will be coming up here, and Ben Webley. And they used to always ask me, we're looking to hire someone, do you know someone? Or what do you think of this vendor? And since Yousuf was the head of UA at Disney and Ben was the senior director over at EA, I got to spend a lot of time actually doing this stuff, and I felt that it was more efficient if we just got everyone together and introduced, their peers, and they could answer their own questions. And one of the things that we learned in the process was that the head of UA at Disney did not know who the head of UA at Gree was, who did not know who the head of UA at Glue or any of these other companies, which is shocking since we work in social networking. So we started having these little get-togethers, and it eventually evolved to our first event. It was GDC 2 years ago, and we had about 47 people, and it was the correct 47 people. And then Casual Connect, we had about 119 people, and GMIC was one of our sponsors, and they were very generous with a $100,000 sponsorship with free passes to all our members. Our last event that year was at their own GMIC event, and we had about 150 people. And this year, we had about 250 people for Facebook reading their F8 conference at our dinner, and which is way too many. Therefore, we've capped our events at 150. We had Google preview their second half Android and Google Play changes in their store at our Casual Connect event, and our dinner tomorrow night is Twitter, and they're going to be talking about their 2015 mobile UA roadmap. All our events are free. There's no charge to them. We have a LinkedIn group under Global UA Fellowship, and the only thing is we're non-vendor. So you can still sign up for events, but we're non-vendor, meaning that the only people who can attend are the actual sponsors, which means that the information and the interaction you have is pure. It's a pure event. It's a premium event. We wanted to, first of all, thank Mod Vista, who's the track sponsor. And a quick note, their session has been moved to 11:45, from 11:45 to 3:50 today. There is a GMIC app. It's called GMIC SV on both Android and iOS, and whoever uses that the most will get a Samsung Gear S. The session evaluations are important, not only for GMIC, but ourselves. So if you can fill that out, that'd be great. Twitter, it's hashtag GMICSE 2014. And there's also a GMIC after party on Wednesday at 7 p.m. I wanted to go ahead and introduce Yousuf Bhaijee, who's our co-founder of Mobile Growth Fellowship, and I consider him one of the sharpest guys I know. He's heading growth over at Zynga now, and he's going to be the moderator here. Yousuf, you can come up. Also on this panel is Eyal Grundstein. He heads mobile marketing at GSN. He's also on our board. Ilya, who's also on our board. Fabien, Nicolas, who's also on our board, is currently at Fabien. And Ying, who's I think probably my oldest friend in the space since he lived in Seattle and worked at Build Network, so that tells you how far we go back. And the session is moving beyond paid acquisition, creative approaches for organic user growth. I'm going to leave it to you, Yousuf. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. So I'm I'm really happy to be here and really happy to see this turnout. It looks like as this organization keeps evolving, we've got more and more interest. So it's great to see that you guys are here. And we're really striving to make sure the content is relevant and insightful, which is why we have our panel here. So the panel, again, it's all over the UA track. It's a little different because we're talking about moving beyond paid user acquisition. And anyone who's done user acquisition here knows why we want to start looking at that. It's because the price is so expensive. And it's not sustainable for whether you're a game company, whether you're a utility app, whether you're anyone who makes a mobile app, to purchase every user. So that's the inspiration of this, and personally why I actually left Disney to move to Zynga and focus on Growth, which was a little bit broader. So to start off, just so I can get a sense of the audience, who here has done user acquisition or is currently doing paid user acquisition? Who here has done unpaid acquisition, so marketing? And who here is at Start? Okay, great. So let's get started. I'm going to start with you guys. So I have a, growth and unpaid organic acquisition means something to me, but I want to hear what it means to your guys' company and how you approach it.
Sure, so to start off, growth and organic user acquisition is basically a combination of kind of ASO, brand building, awareness building activities, PR, and overall looking at the product holistically, not just from a CPI versus LTV perspective, but from kind of overall blended LTV, both organic and unpaid.
Hi, I'm Ilya. For me, organic installs is basically anything that generates an install that cannot be attributed to a paid channel. From my perspective, the most significant source of that would be platform marketing efforts. So that's based on the relationship that a developer has with Apple and Google. But not everybody can really count on that. So there are other ways of improving the level of organic installs that a company receives. I think a key focus for you guys, or something to think about, is how do you optimize the performance of your marketing assets, because that can lead to improved conversions both on the organic side as well as on the paid side.
So on my end, in terms of organic user acquisition, I will think that the first and foremost, especially if you're a startup, right, your product itself could have features that empower the users in your community to spread the word. I think this is almost the best way. If you have a couple thousand people in, but if they're each bringing on board 2 other users, you have a very nice growth pattern, I think. The other method that I guess I will discuss, and there's a specific condition to which to be successful, is opening up a beta program where people could register their email and join even before your app is launched. So you create a community around the value proposition you have, and it's something that could be very powerful for some context. Last but not least, I think you've mentioned it as well, Eyal, like App Store optimization. A bunch of great tools out there, and I think it's still the cheapest method that there is to gain, anywhere from 50 to 5,000 extra user a day for your app.
Hi, my name is Ying. I head up the games vertical at Tango. For me, organic unpaid is basically anything that you're not paying for, right? So anything that you're not directly pulling out dollars from your pocketbook in order to pay some network or some channel for a user. The area that I'm probably going to be focusing on is users generated through organic means coming from messaging apps. So for those of you who are familiar with Line, Kakao, WeChat, Tango is actually a very similar app where we're messaging and we have 265 million registered users. And so for games that are on these types of platforms where essentially you're not paying for each individual user that comes in, I think you would categorize that as organic.
Great, so it seems like we have consensus, broad consensus on what growth is and acquiring organic users. What I'm interested in from you guys is, given that, what has been the one most successful growth tactic that you guys have deployed in your respective companies? why was it so successful? And then everyone gets involved in that.
Well, to share something, like I guess that has been successful both at DNA and then Perfect World, I describe that it's a specific context because it's core games. But one time we tried for both Marvel War of Heroes, but as well an MMO that I was launching at Perfect World to open a site a couple of months before the launch of the app itself, and both a PR push, community push, and we ended up getting about 100,000 people that pre-registered, and those users brought together the cohort of those users over $5 million in revenue. So if you do the math per user, it's a very significant amount of money each user brought in. So I do think it's valid for, of course, IP games. It's valid as well if you have a very strong community around a specific type of games. But I know a lot of you guys are not necessarily game maker, right? It could be app maker. I think you saw Mailbox. You saw a bunch of companies doing a pretty good job in the application and utility world as well to generate a very strong consumer interest around, a unique feature that the competition wasn't offering in the space, and doing a PR push around it to get, the initial 10, 20, 50,000 users interested in your app. So I do think it's a valid technique. Plus, the good news is then you could sell it eventually to VCs. If your trying to raise fund, the fact that you have already X thousands of fans who are really engaged with your app is always a valid asset for when you're pitching.
And how do you take that strategy if you don't have a gigantic existing user base?
Well, I think to your point, I insist on really the value proposition you're bringing, right? Are you bringing something unique or not to the market? If you don't have an IP, don't have a large network of users, if you're not bringing something really unique, it's probably not the best tactic for you.
So I think for us, the biggest impact is of course the Tango messaging platform itself. So of our 265 million registered users, let me point out one game. Our biggest game is a game called Growth-1, which at this point, it's been in the market for about a year. It's generated a little over 11 million installs, most of which have come either from the platform or from the social engagement from the platform. So similar to some of the messaging apps out in Asia, Tango has a social SDK which allows you to gift share, run leaderboards, invite friends, etc. And so through that social graph, you're able to generate these organic installs. Similar, again, to let's say if you were to use Facebook Connect. Except at this point, Tango, there aren't that many games on there, and so the few games that are on there get a disproportionate flow of the organic users.
So basically, use Tango.
If you like to.
All right, so speaking of other companies, who have you seen that's been really successful at organic growth? What's the one best example you guys have seen? And why was it successful? Eyal, do you want to start?
Sure. So an example is the Kim Kardashian game, Tango. Obviously, they spend a lot on paid user acquisition, but they're also doing really interesting things with Twitter, for example, like generating trends off of the actual game by tweeting things that Kim is doing in the game, as well as playing on Kim Kardashian keyword as like a top search keyword in the App Store, getting traffic that way. So I think they're a prime example of kind of using paid acquisition and also using a lot of growth tactics to build like a strong user base.
Yeah, I'd say building on top of that, any game that's really leveraging a strong IP is going to have a big advantage in terms of generating organic growth. So for example, another company that I'm pointing to is Tango. They have their Family Guy game, which I'm pretty sure at this point they still haven't spent any UA on. And so if you look at when the game first came out, it was at the top 3 of the charts, and then at this point it's pretty steadily in terms of getting top grossing because of the game inside itself. But that company specifically chose not to do paid UA for their game, and they leaned heavily on IP. And so now you see a lot of developers and publishers shifting their priorities towards trying to sign top IP so that they can discount some of their paid user acquisition.
Well, a good example of a small studio, I guess, that didn't spend for sure user acquisition was Nimblebits, right? When they shipped Tiny Tower initially, you were able to share your tower, nice little picture with a link to install the game on iOS through Twitter. And I think, not only, it wasn't just like, okay, please spread the word and give you a reward in the game. It was actually, display your tower to your friends. You create a very strong engagement where people were like, oh wow, that's so cool, I want to compete with you, let me engage with the product. I think it's a 2 years old execution, but they did a really good job understanding what Twitter was and how to engage with your network of friends and followers on Twitter.
I mean, I'm going to use the example of Flappy Bird. I think that was more of like just really kind of hitting the jackpot, but that game is just an example of like the extreme power of positive word of mouth and people sharing, sharing their success or failures on social media. I think, I don't recall if initially that game had the ability to share via social networks, but I imagine that the addition of that would have helped that company. And if you look at the games that came on after Flappy Bird, anything that had the word Flappy in the game name ended up popping on the top free charts, and that's again a result of just people searching for Flappy Bird and people taking advantage of the App Store optimization.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a good example of being opportunistic with trends that are happening. Flappy adding Flappy is exactly what you can do if you're being creative and you're thinking about what's relevant and contextual. And you can do that with other things like the Super Bowl or just any other big event is what we've seen in Zynga as well. So how about you guys have mentioned Twitter and some other social networks, Facebook. How about other ones? The way I look at it is there's a cost, even if you're doing organic acquisition, there's still a cost if you're doing product features. And there are many social networks out there, some that are easier to integrate with and have more functionality like Twitter. And other ones are more upcoming, like Instagram or Snapchat. How do you guys look at that? Is there one that people should focus on, or are there two if you're going to integrate something in your app?
Well, I think one of the key elements, right, for Twitter and Facebook, there is like guys available. There is a program to support developers who have cross-acting feature. Like to my knowledge, right, it's a little bit more rudimentary with Instagram and Snapchat. I don't think I've opened the platform really at the moment to really integrate and support those techniques. So the key is like, unless the platform holder is willing to open it, which is the case for Kakao, which is the case for WeChat and a few others, it's just really hard from the developer standpoint to keep saying, oh, let's try to integrate with Snapchat unless they have an SDK available and or a method of integration that allows the developer to do it pretty quickly. To your point, I think when you have a 2-week sprint ahead of you, the last thing you want to do is going into something that's unproven, where you don't have like thousands of developers who have already like QA for you the SDK released by the platform holder.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely important how key and how much the platform actually prioritizes games. So if you look at, say, some of the platforms that were mentioned, or let's say Facebook in the early days, if they didn't prioritize games, as a developer, you might not get the full advantage of that platform. Whereas at this point, looking at the success of what WeChat has been able to drive for games in China, what Line has been able to do in Japan, what Kakao has been able to do in Korea, Tango is 100% full into games. Earlier this year, we raised about 280 million, 215 million of that coming from Alibaba. And from those funds, we actually pulled and set aside 25 million to dedicate to the games fund. So at this point, we're funding, investing developers, we're funding marketing, and we're pushing games from the platform. At this point, we're all in. So as a developer, I'd say it's key to look for platforms where they are going to support game developers, as opposed to ones where, let's say, you might try to hack your way in, but if they're not supported, they could turn things off at any time.
So for networks that are not supported yet, do not have an SDK for you to integrate in them, which one, when it does open up, would you guys go after? Is it Snapchat? Is it someone else? Because for me, that's where the opportunity lies. With Zynga back in the day, they were the first ones to really take advantage of the social and viral channels at Facebook, and that was a large part of our success. Again, a lot of social networks are not open, but at some point, they likely will be open.
Well, I think in the meantime of having those SDK available, I think a good way to engage is if you have a community manager, make this person reach out to influencers present on the network, right? If you have somebody with 50,000, 100,000 followers on Instagram, this could be a good way to spread the word. And there is as well now agencies who are born and are either Twitter, Instagram, or Vine natives, and could help you to reach out to the very large influencer, which at some point are going to request some money, so it's not totally organic. But you could use those agencies. But a good way to start and experiment with that is really having your own community manager reaching out and trying to either reveal an exclusive feature or just in general engage with an opinion leader which is relevant for the app or games you're trying to sell.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, there are examples of Vine celebrities suddenly popping and actually creating their own games and hitting the top free charts just through their influencer network. So both Vine and Snapchat would be like two networks I would focus on. And if you ask like teenagers today or young adults, that's where they're spending their time on Facebook. So if you're looking for like growth tactic and want to grow where the audience is heading, I would look at those two networks.
And with influencers, does it only work if an influencer has a really large audience? Or is there some mix of, it's more niche or it's a smaller audience, but you have the right content and it goes viral? Have any of you guys approached that way, or are you guys just looking for who are the big influencers based off of audience size?
So at DNA, we ran an experiment where we worked with an agency that basically tapped into Vine and Instagram influencers to really just drive a ton of organic installs for the app. Unfortunately, the impact was not as significant as we had hoped, and I think that was largely a part of the genre of the game. It wasn't really that mass market. So I think you really need to take into account what kind of application or what kind of game you're trying to promote, and then making sure that it really fits within the audience. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily know that influencers that were specifically targeted. We did see the content that was created after the fact, but I think as a learning, I think more due diligence around who the actual content creators are that you're trying to leverage to influence their networks.
And have you guys? I think it's great. You guys